We're waiting the sentencing memo recommendation from Robert Mueller's team tonight. That could happen anytime before midnight. We'll obviously bring you that as breaking news. There is other breaking news tonight ahead of Michael Cohen's upcoming testimony before Congress. The question is, did the president know about it earlier today when he said this?
Are you concerned about Michael Cohen's testimony before Congress can speak?
No.
Mr. President, are you still considering...
Lawyer-client, but, he's taking his own chances.
Fairly nonchalant, all things considered, especially given that this next story crosses his red lines. It landed late today in the New York Times. The headline reads, Cohen gave prosecutors new information on the Trump family business. The New York Times' Maggie Haberman shares the byline. She is our political analyst and joins us right now. So, Maggie, talk about your new reporting that Michael Cohen offered up to federal prosecutors in New York. Do we know how detailed it got, or what do we know about it?
As we say in the piece, Michael Cohen met recently with prosecutors from the Southern District of New York, which is where he pleaded guilty, to talk about the Trump Organization and information related to insurance claims. We don't have more details than that. We don't know where these insurance claims were processed or what they were for specifically, but that is what he talked about. He also was asked questions about Imad Zuberi. Zuberi is the one individual who was mentioned by name in the subpoena the Southern District issued to the Presidential Inaugural Committee a couple of weeks ago. There was a more of a business transaction between Cohen and Zuberi than Zuberi had let on in an interview with the New York Times. There had been some check that he had written to Cohen for $100,000. Cohen apparently didn't deposit it, but Zuberi had played it off to us as if they had barely had any interactions. What this all adds up to, we don't know. But remember, Cohen is going to be testifying 3 times next week, 2 closed doors, 1 in an open setting. I think there are going to be a number of things he's not allowed to talk about, but it's really just, again, a reminder that he remains one of the biggest threats to the president, not just now, but going forward.
So Zuberi, and that's the name not a lot of people know, but you've reported on him in the past. Initially, there was, part of what authorities have been looking into is money paid to the inaugural committee. Right. You're saying at the same time, he also was paying Michael Cohen $100,000, which is something he had downplayed to you previously, saying that he really hadn't had business dealings with him.
Correct. He said that he had a couple of interactions with him, that they had talked about doing some real estate venture that didn't end up taking place. That appears to have been true. However, he did write this check to Michael Cohen that appears not to have been cashed, but I don't know why you write someone a $100,000 check if you're not planning on going into business with them. And to your point, Zuberi is notable because he was a very large donor to the inaugural committee. He had been a Clinton donor and an Obama donor before that. He was someone who was looking for entry points into the new administration. He clearly thought that Michael Cohen might be one. He thought the inaugural might be another. He wrote $900,000 in donations to the inaugural committee.
We should also point out this is around the time that Michael Cohen seemed to be kind of selling himself as an entry point into the new Trump administration. I mean, there were companies, right. I think, AT&T was one of them, and others, which we now know, I think, gave Michael Cohen money for sort of consulting.
There were a lot of companies that I think were looking to that had absolutely no connection to Trump or his orbit, and that were trying to understand the new White House. And I think that Michael Cohen became somebody who folks went into business with for that purpose. But I think that, again, we don't know the full scope of everything that he talked about with the prosecutors. But he clearly did not simply, stick to what we have heard before, which is about hush money payments to women who had claimed to have had affairs with President Trump. Michael Cohen worked for the Trump Organization for a decade. He was around for an awful lot of discussions and awful lot of transactions that took place, and presumably he has stories to tell.
Do you know how something like this comes about? I mean, why wasn't this information that Michael Cohen gave to them a while back? I mean, he's certainly been involved with the Southern District now for quite some time. And, you talked about also information he might give in the future. Is it not the kind of situation where they just ask him to download all his information that he has in his head? It's a great question. Remember that Michael Cohen did not strike a
a cooperation deal with the Southern District. That would have required him to basically sit and answer whatever questions they wanted about whatever topic that they wanted in his life, any crimes that he may have knowledge about or partaken in himself or been aware of. He chose not to do that, and that is believed to be part of why he got the pretty large sentence that he got. There is always the possibility that if prosecutors find his information credible and useful, that they could recommend a sentence reduction. It obviously remains to be seen if that'll happen. He was supposed to go to jail in 2 weeks. He is now not supposed to go for another 2 months because he had some medical issues. But I think that this has not taken place in the typical course of things that we see with the Southern District. We're just going to have to wait and see what it amounts to.
It's also interesting because in the past, the president has continued to attack Michael Cohen, in sort of mob-like terms, referring to him as a rat. It's interesting, though, to see how the president is going to react to his testimony, because, as you say, he doesn't have a cooperating agreement. If he has, he may have more information that he could give to prosecutors, depending on how prison time goes for him, depending on how his feelings are toward the president as time goes by.
Right. And look, it certainly doesn't have to be just thinking ahead to the testimony, forgetting about what happens in the future with prosecutors. To your point, he's going to testify next week. The president will be out of the country. Michael Cohen can talk about things that, even if they are not legally damaging, they could be politically damaging to the president. And that has been one of the things that has confounded a lot of people, even supporters of the president, who look at how he has behaved toward Cohen and think, why would you intentionally attack someone the way he has, knowing that Cohen may have this wealth of information that he may be able to talk about. The president and his allies have repeatedly questioned Michael Cohen's credibility. The Southern District, even there, where prosecutors went after him pretty aggressively, they also said that they found his information on certain issues to be truthful. Robert Mueller's team issued a stronger memo before Michael Cohen was sentenced, saying that he had been helpful to their investigation and that they found it truthful. So I think you are going to see all of this play out when Michael Cohen is testifying next week.
Just very briefly, and you may not know the answer to this because it may not be known. Do we know, is Michael Cohen meeting in advance with, staffers on Capitol Hill in advance of his testimony? Because oftentimes politicians like to do that because it can help them hone their questions. They're not kind of just going on a fishing expedition in front of cameras. They can hone their questions much more succinctly.
We don't know the answer to that. I would assume that there's going to be some insight, at least among Democrats, about what Michael Cohen, what areas generally he might be touching on. But it's not clear at all how much advance prep there's going to be. It's not clear how much time everybody's going to get. There are a lot of members of this committee, and so I think that there's going to be an awful lot of interest from different people.
Yeah, Maggie Haberman, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Coming up, an arrest warrant has been issued for R&B singer R. Kelly, who's been indicted on 10 felony counts of sexual abuse involving 4 victims, including minors. The singer's lawyer says he's going to turn himself in tonight. We'll have the latest on that. There's more breaking news tonight. R. Kelly's lawyer says the singer will turn himself in tonight after an arrest warrant was issued on charges that he sexually abused 4 victims, including at least 3 minors. The executive producer of a documentary series that aired recently called Surviving R. Kelly says the singer's alleged activities has been an open secret for almost 2 decades. And we quote him right now, saying it's time for him to finally pay for the harm he's caused, the black girls' lives that he's ruined. CNN's Randy Kay joins us right now with the latest. So what more do we know about this? Because, this has been going on, obviously, for quite some time.
Absolutely, Anderson. R. Kelly has long had a reputation for trolling underage girls, dating as far back as the 1990s. Remember, he reportedly had married the singer Aaliyah when she was just 15. He was 27. Neither actually ever admitted to the marriage, which was reportedly annulled before she died in a plane crash years later. But over the years, the stories of abuse and manipulation have just continued to surface. Girls as young as 15 accusing Kelly of having sex with them, plying them with drugs and alcohol. The first lawsuit was filed in 1996 by a woman who alleged a sexual relationship with Kelly, which she said began when she was 15. That was later reportedly settled. Then in 2001, another lawsuit from a woman who said Kelly initiated a sexual relationship with her when she was 17. That case also settled. And in 2002, Kelly was accused of having sex with a 14-year-old girl in a video in which the girl was urinated on. Kelly was arrested in that case when he was 35, then acquitted 6 years later. One accuser claimed that he impregnated her when she was 16. Another said he videotaped her without her knowledge. Kelly has strongly denied all of these allegations over the years. But as of tonight, Anderson, he has been indicted on 10 counts of aggravated criminal sexual abuse involving the 4 different victims, as you mentioned. 3 were older than 13, but under 17. That's according to the state's attorney in Chicago. 1 count refers to Kelly using force or the threat of force. His attorneys have yet to release a statement on all of this. But this all comes on the heels of attorney Michael Avenatti announcing that he's handed over a videotape to the state's attorney's office in Illinois that he says shows Kelly having sex with an underage girl. CNN was actually able to view that tape, and it appears to show Kelly having sex with a girl who refers to her, quote, 14-year-old genitalia. And the man in the video also refers to the age of her genitalia as well. And the girl repeatedly calls the man daddy. This new footage, very disturbing, lasts almost 43 minutes. But what is on the video apparently mirrors some of the alleged acts for which Kelly was first arrested for back in 2002.
And there was also videotape in that trial following the 2002 arrest.
Correct. That was a child pornography case that went to trial finally in 2008, so it took 6 years. But in that case, he was accused of making a 27-minute sex tape with an underage girl. The alleged victim in that case met him when she was just 12. She claimed that he made her do vile things, and he filmed them all. That video does have similarities, including the urination, to the VHS tape that just surfaced recently and was submitted to the Cook County authorities. But in the end, the jury in that case decided that the identity of the girl was not conclusive, and he was found not guilty. But now, as more women have continued to come forward with stories of abuse, something really seemed to shift in R. Kelly's world, Anderson. In January, the Lifetime series you mentioned, Surviving R. Kelly, was released, and that included testimony from several women who said they had been abused by the singer. And then after that, Kelly was dropped by his record label. So now, after all these years, many women are hoping that justice will finally be served, Anderson.
All right, well, we'll see turning himself in tonight. Randy, thanks very much. Joining us now, CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Ann Milgram. And 10 charges, a maximum of 7 years on each count if convicted. How strong does the state's case against R. Kelly seem to be?
I think it seems very strong, and we can distinguish it in a minute against that case that went forward in 2008 with 1 victim. Here you've got 4 separate victims. That is, that is a pattern. And you've got 3 of them are underage, so essentially statutory rape charges. And then you've got 1 that's force or threat of force. And so here you've got 4 separate women, 3 of which are between the ages of 13 and 17, all of whom are alleged victims in this case. And it really is, when you think about these types of cases and having victims cooperate and come forward, having that number of victims, it makes a huge difference in sex crimes cases. And I would say one thing just about the 2008 case, having investigated and tried cases that involve sex crimes, I would say this. That case was particularly difficult because the victim did not cooperate at the trial. Mm-hmm. And so it was hard to figure out. It was, the government was not able to prove that it was her, and R. Kelly denied that it was him. I think we're going to see a really different situation here.
I mean, you prosecuted sex crimes. As you said, I mean, the fact that there are multiple victims here makes a major difference when a alleged victim refuses to cooperate, refuses to testify. Then it becomes, very, if not impossible, to proceed with the case.
Absolutely. And even 1 victim cooperating, it is not nearly as strong as having 4. And remember that Kim Foxx, the state's attorney, after that documentary that you and Randy were just discussing came out a couple months ago, Kim Foxx went on, national TV and said, please come forward if there are victims in Cook County. So she now has 4 victims who are willing to cooperate with her in a case against R. Kelly. That makes it such a strong case versus having just a single victim. And it really will make a difference in the trial and the prosecution.
So there's expected to be a bond hearing tomorrow. Would someone facing these kind of charges typically be allowed to post bond and remain free?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I mean, what you see in a lot of cities is you would see very high bail set, if at all set, in cases like this. They didn't charge rape here. They charged it as aggravated criminal sexual abuse. So it's sort of the level 2 felony. Again, the sentences are really potentially very high, between up to 7 years on each count if he's convicted. And so I think it's very likely that the judge will set extraordinarily high bail on R. Kelly. the real question is he a risk of flight? And so, that's what it's going to come down to. Is he willing to surrender his passport? What if he has tour dates or commitments abroad? A judge would not look kindly on that. And again, he has showed up to court before. He has been present in trials. So I think he's a good chance to get high bail.
All right. Ann Milgram, appreciate it. Thank you. Just ahead, the latest in the Jussie Smollett saga. I'll talk with Dr. Cornel West about the alleged hoax and why it may cause people to cast doubts about the next time a real racist attack surfaces. We'll be right back.
I'm Chris Cuomo. Let's get after it.
Cuomo Prime Time, next on CNN.
The producers behind the Fox show Empire have decided to remove Jussie Smollett's character from the final 2 episodes of the current season. This, of course, have been cooperating with authorities. Joining me now is Dr. Cornel West, professor at Princeton and Harvard as well. Dr. West, thanks for being with us. First of all, do you believe the allegation that Jussie Smollett staged this attack and filed a false report, or at this point, where are you on this?
Well, it's a good question, though. I mean, I like to stay in contact with the evidence and hope he has a fair trial, but it looks as if there's evidence that for some reason he came up with this hoax, but we'll have to see. He's a very talented actor, and the sad thing is that we lose sight of the human beings who are the genuine victims of gay brothers, black folk, brown, red, yellow, and others. And this is true even in the R. Kelly case. That's so sad. It's the children, it's the precious and priceless black girls that we need to focus on. I mean, his genius is undeniable. His music has enriched my life, but he has to be accountable. That kind of activity is gangster activity, it's thuggish activity. He has to be accountable. There's a long history of this, though, Brother Anderson. You got Martin Heidegger's philosophical genius and a Nazi, Ezra Pound, lyrical genius in poetry, but a fascist. How do we keep track of the art which still affects us, and then the very ugly and vicious and malicious activity that's too often that goes hand in hand with genius? But I think R. Kelly needs a fair trial too. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And Robert Kraft, we can go on and on. The brothers are just out of control of all colors, I can tell you that. All we brothers need to be rendered in some way accountable. But go right ahead.
Well, a spokesman for the NAACP said that the allegations against Smollett should not be used as a smokescreen to obscure real racism in the United States. How concerned are you about that and people using this as kind of a reason to doubt claims of actual hate crimes?
No, I think the NAACP hits the nail on the head. There's no doubt about it. But think about this, though, Brother Anderson, that war crimes, Wall Street crimes, white-collar crimes, I wish that we focus as much on those crimes as we do on these particular hoaxes, seemingly, and even the crimes on the street. If we're going to have a rule of law, it's got to be a rule of law for everybody. We've all got to be accountable. But see, I come out of the legacy of Jerusalem that says I always look for the criminals at the top, and then I keep track of the criminals in the middle and below. Because we need to be concerned with criminality, no matter what, as well as the criminality inside of ourselves. But the ones at the top oftentimes are the most dangerous. And they're the ones who very rarely get this kind of focus, this kind of highlight, this kind of accountability that people are calling for.
Well, that's certainly true. The superintendent, who was interesting for the Chicago police yesterday, talked about how, as a black man, he was left asking why would anyone, especially an African-American man, use the symbolism of a noose to make false accusation if that is in fact what happened.
Yeah. I also want to keep in mind that I think Brother Smollett has a drug problem, and so he might not be in full control. He still has to be accountable, but he might not be in full control. R. Kelly in the same way. You think of his precious mother, Joanne, taking him to church and teaching him music. He couldn't read, he couldn't write, but produces this magnificent music. Lula, his first girlfriend, who dies drowning in his eyes. The wounds are so deep, but the fundamental question always is, will you be a wounded herder or be a wounded healer? And if you're wounded, as is the case, it seems to me, with Smollett, as is the case with R. Kelly, might be the case with Robert Kraft. I don't know his life. But the question is, whatever wounds you have, will you choose to be a healer or will you choose to be a herder? And if your wounds are simply going to be those that produce wound, it's a choice. And if you're wounding others, especially precious girls and black girls, I mean, my God, you know, the value of life in this society is one in which our precious black sisters, especially under 15, are always overlooked, always downplayed. And so when you engage in that kind of violation, oh my God, this is sinful, capital S, if I can use a Christian category on corporate media here tonight. It's wrong. It's just immoral, though, brother.
It's interesting, though, you talk about choice. I mean, people are sometimes victims of their circumstance, but there are plenty of people who would have every reason to, you know, be angry to do something wrong, and yet they make a choice of how they want to live their life. Despite where they, you know, what they have experienced as children or what they have experienced at some point in their life, they make a choice about the path that they want to walk. And I think it's an important point that that is a choice one can make.
And that is precisely the lesson that R. Kelly heard from his magnificent teacher, Lena McClin at Kenwood High School, who was a niece of Thomas Dorsey, who wrote Precious Lord, Martin Luther King Jr.'s favorite song. And what did she tell R. Kelly? You have been wounded. You grew up in Ida B. Wells' project. You grew up hated. You grew up haunted. You grew up harassed. You can bounce back. But in bouncing back, you not only create beautiful music, but you got to treat human beings right. The women, the men, the elders, the babies. And R. Kelly has this genius on the one hand and thuggish proclivity on the other, like all of us, and it seemed to allow the thuggish proclivity, if the evidence is what it is, and he's going to have to pay, you got to reap what you sow. But even he can bounce back in prison, no, brother. He can bounce back in prison.
There's redemption. Redemption is possible for anybody.
Bounce back is always a possibility. That's exactly right.
Dr. Cornel West, appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I want to check in with Chris, see what he was working on for Cuomo Prime Time at the top of the hour. Chris?
Brother Anderson, Brother Cornel has a unique ability to give one hope. And he has an interesting take on R. Kelly. My take on it is the flip side. I mean, you've been hearing stories like this for a long time about him. And I think part of this prosecution is going to have to be a discussion of why did it take so long for these charges to manifest, and are they going to be evidencing a pattern that has been over a long course of time? So it's going to be an interesting case to watch. We have some new information tonight about what Michael Cohen has been talking about with investigators. The president's right. Cohen wasn't just his lawyer. He was very involved in different aspects of his business. And we're going to relay some new information about what that could mean for Donald Trump and why this could be a bigger problem for him than the Mueller probe. And of course, just like you, we're on Mueller watch. We're going to see if this pleading on Manafort comes out. This is the last best chance to find out what Manafort meant to the actual Russia probe before the final report. So we're on it.
Yep. All right. 7 minutes from now. A lot to look for. Chris, thanks very much. We'll see you in a few minutes. More breaking news on this busy Friday, including on Robert Kraft, as we were just talking about, the new, owner of the New England Patriots, who we touched on briefly. He is being charged with 2 counts of soliciting prostitution in Florida. We'll have the latest on the charges against him. Robert Kraft, who owns the New England Patriots, is being charged with 2 counts of soliciting prostitution. This in the wake of a months-long investigation in South Florida. The charges against Kraft and others center around a spa in Jupiter, Florida. Jason Carroll joins us now with the latest on that. So talk about the details of these charges. What is alleged?
Well, this all stems from an investigation into allegations of human trafficking, which investigators say took place at the Asia Day Spa down there in Jupiter, Florida, Anderson. Police charged Kraft with 2 counts of soliciting another for prostitution. This is a misdemeanor, but they say they've got all the evidence they need. They say part of that evidence is on videotape. They say they have videotape of Kraft in a room where they say that they characterize this videotape as Kraft taking part in what they characterize as paid acts. They did not elaborate beyond that, but you can use your imagination there. I mean, this is an investigation that went on for several months. And again, police say they've got all the evidence they need on this one.
Has Kraft made a statement or had anything to say about this?
Well, he has. He did make a statement. He ended up making a statement through his spokesperson, who said, in part, Kraft denies the allegations. The statement reads, "We categorically deny that Mr. Kraft engaged in any illegal activity. Because it is a judicial matter, we will not be commenting any further." But once again, Anderson, police say they've got not only evidence against Kraft, but against 25 other men who they identify as Johns. They say they've got tape of Kraft and those other men as well.
All right. Well, Jason Carroll, we'll continue to follow it. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Want to give you a reminder, don't miss Full Circle. If you haven't seen it, it's our daily interactive newscast on Facebook. Get to vote on what stories we cover. It's every day at 6:25 p.m. Eastern Time. You get all the details. Watch it at on facebook.com/Anderson Cooper Full Circle. Hope you check it out. It's fun. Jason Carroll had that report on Kraft. No doubt more about that tonight. Also R. Kelly and a lot more ahead. Chris is going to be handling things from here on out. Let's go to Chris for Cuomo Prime Time.
Thank you, Anderson. I am Chris
Cuomo Prime Time.
Thank you, Anderson. I am Chris Cuomo, and welcome to Prime Time. It's Friday, and I have new information for you. Federal investigators have talked to the president's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, about the president's business. And I don't mean personal peccadillos. The president said, "Don't mess with my money," and now they are doing exactly that. CNN has learned investigators have spoken with Cohen to learn in part about insurance policies and claims at Trump properties, as well as other business practices. Why Cohen? Because the president's right. He really wasn't just a lawyer for him. He did lots of work on the business side. Cuomo's court has the answer to why this could be worse than Mueller for the president. Speaking of the special counsel, tonight is the deadline to file his last major pleading in the longest-running case of his Russian interference probe. How did Paul Manafort's crimes fit into the wider Russia investigation? We may learn tonight on our watch, so don't go anywhere because that could come any minute. We also have new information on when Mueller plans to drop his final report. It's a big night, so let's get after it. A lot unfolding. Let's immediately gavel Cuomo's court into session. We have Neil Katyal and John Yoo. John Yoo, welcome to the show. Good to have you for the first time.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Neil, you good? You hearing me okay? No? All right, good. John, I'll start with you. You're the new guest anyway, so you get to go first. So the new reporting we have is, yes, they want to know about the president's business practices in the Southern District of New York. Insurance claims. The New York Times had that and left it there. We have advanced it to how did they use insurance at the companies? How did they file? How much did they cover? How much did they claim? How much did they recover versus how much they spent on those claims? Was it done legitimately? Pretty specific questioning. What does it mean to you? Where could it lead?
Well, this seems to me to be part of the Southern District's broader investigation into the Trump organization and how it was doing business. And as you said in the lead into the show, this is separate from the Mueller probe and whether there was any kind of conspiracy with the Russians. We're going to see that report hopefully next week or in the week following. And that's going to focus on a different thing. I think you're probably right. If there's going to be something that's going to continue to dog the president, that's going to give people in Congress grounds to conduct oversight, potentially even impeachment, it's going to be things that are coming out of the Southern District of New York. And unfortunately, I think it centers around this guy, Cohen, who is a convicted liar and who has been doing, sounds like he was a kind of a bagman potentially for the president. Unfortunately, I can't tell whether he's telling the truth. I mean, he's trying to reduce his sentence by claiming that Trump ordered him to pay off women, that the Trump organization, it sounds like, is committing insurance fraud. Who knows? Right. But look, you have the special counsel who has worked with Cohen, who said he was credible and useful. And you guys deal with liars or people who've lied all the time. You just need the corroboration. So, Neil, it was interesting. When I was first developing this today, I was like, all right, so what? They're going to find out that they cheated on their insurance policies, that they, took money that was more than what they had to spend on it. A lot of people do that. But then I was thinking to myself, a lot of people cheat on their taxes also, and they don't go to jail for it. Michael Cohen is. Yes, he pleaded guilty. But, if they choose to prosecute you, then you have to explain those actions. How deep could this go in your opinion?
I think it could go deep. I 100% agree with that. And I'm not sure I'll be saying this much tonight, but I agree almost with everything that, John, you just said. That is, the Southern District investigation poses a real threat to the president. I also think that the Mueller one and the Russia one does as well. But the kind of thread that ties both of these together, Chris, is the lying, constant lying. But whether it's on insurance, whether it's dealing with Russia, whatever, Trump is like a grandmaster Pinocchio and the master of all of this. And, you know, John's right that he attracts liars around him. He's like a magnet for liars, whether it's Cohen or Flynn or Manafort or all of these people. And once the Southern District starts looking into it, I think they're going to find some pretty damaging stuff. Obviously, the president is entitled to, you know, the presumption of innocence and so on. But the Southern District's already uncovered lie after lie and found, most importantly, remarkable, only time really in 40 years that the prosecutors have said a sitting president, ordered the commission of federal felonies. And they've said that back in November.
So, John, they say the president has said, don't mess with my money. Is there a line at which you think it would be okay for the attorney general to say, look, this is a sitting president. You want to take up these kinds of prosecutions about his past life, about all these other actions. Do it after after he's served his term.
Yeah. I think this is one where you and Neil and I might disagree. I think the Constitution really gives Congress this job. If the president is unfit for office, if he has made bad policies, committed maladministration, committed political-style crimes, I think that's what Congress's job is, to investigate that and conduct impeachment proceedings. I don't think it's a job for a special counsel. I think that's kind of become a distraction for the real constitutional route. However, I think for these crimes that the SDNY here is investigating that occurred before Trump was president, I think that the sensible thing for the courts to do and prosecutors to do is to delay that until after the presidency is over. Now, we didn't do that with President Clinton. There's a case called Clinton versus Jones, which says let the process work through. But it also, Supreme Court also said, but we don't want those investigations to interfere with the president's ability to do his job.
Neil, counterpoint.
Yeah, so two things. One, if John is right that this is a job for Congress, the logical consequence that follows is Mueller, the Southern District, all of their information has to be given to Congress so they can evaluate impeachment. It would be the height of kind of putting someone above the law to say, oh, you can't prosecute through the executive branch, and then Congress, you can't impeach because we're going to hide all this information from you, which is why every scholar who takes John's position, which is a sitting president can't be indicted, also says the remedy is impeachment, and that's a role for Congress. And the second thing is, for crimes like the Southern District ones, which go to lying and cheating to win the election in the first place, I'm not sure that the prohibition on indicting a sitting president applies, because what that would incentivize is if you cheat a lot and lie a lot and commit a lot of crimes enough to win an election, then you effectively get a delay or get out of jail free card, and that can't possibly be the law.
Now, on Mueller, let me use your own case against you, Neil. The idea of, you know, given what he was asked to do, he's not just a general fact finder, although that's the way I interpret the first line of Rosenstein's delivery to the special counsel. The first line says, find any information of contacts or coordination between the government and the campaign. That doesn't speak to criminality to me. But even if you want to fold that into ultimately he is a prosecutor and looking for prosecutable items, then this report could be kind of thin, Neil. And in that case, they'll be left with a lot of unanswered questions for Congress. I guess they'd have to subpoena Mueller, have him come in, tell him the parts of the story that he didn't put in the report, and proceed.
I think that's exactly right, Chris. And in an op-ed I wrote in the New York Times today, I essentially outlined exactly that point, which is, you know, Trump has been hoping for a short, concise report, but that actually might be the worst thing for him, because that'll just then move the entire ball game to Congress. And there is precedent from Watergate to have all of the special counsel's materials and investigation turned over to Congress, including grand jury information and other confidential information.
John, for grand jury information, John, he would have to go the AG. He'd have to get a court order for that. I mean, it's attainable, but you guys should kind of be on the same page about that, right? If it's a thin report and there are questions that are left unanswered and suggestions of hallways that weren't walked down, then Mueller could get subpoenaed and you wind up with a whole new round of exploration.
I've always thought Trump made a serious tactical mistake by attacking Mueller, by questioning his ethics, by trying to delay the report. The best thing that could happen for Trump is that the Mueller report makes a lot of things public. That's a thick telephone book. So I don't know if people know what telephone books are, but they used to be these really thick books. A telephone book, thick report that lays out everything he found. That's if it sounds like Mueller's decided not to indict the president, didn't find conspiracy to commit federal crimes, then everything Mueller says, Mueller is the gold standard for federal prosecutors. Everything he said that clears the president will be helpful. So I agree with Neil. The shorter, ironically, Trump's been doing things to make the report shorter, fighting the investigation. That's going to give Congress a lot more space in any kind of impeachment investigation.
Last quick thing. Do you guys think that this Manafort pleading, assuming it comes tonight, I know they have to negotiate redactions and stuff like that. He's got a midnight deadline. Do you think that this is going to be the definitive tale of why this guy matters in the probe as opposed to his previous life and what he was doing to cover any potential debts that he had? Neil, give me a quick answer.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be necessarily definitive, but it will tell us a lot. I mean, this Manafort worked for 143 days for the campaign. That's like 14 Scaramucci's. And he lied to Mueller, and he's been caught red-handed lying to Mueller.
No one wants 14 Scaramucci's. One is enough.
Exactly.
Anthony doesn't want 14
He's been caught lying about... Yeah, he gave sensitive polling data to the Russians. And that, that's the crown jewels of a campaign. And the question, Chris and I, you and I have been talking about this a lot. Why lie so much about Russia? We have a little suggestion in the last sentencing transcript that it's about a pardon, that the prosecutors, Mueller's team, think he's been angling for a pardon. I think if we hear anything more, we'd like to, that's the part that would be the real news tonight. What is this about a pardon? What's this about polling data?
Let's leave it there. John Yoo, great to have you on the show. Please come again. Neil, always a pleasure. Thank you for making Anthony Scaramucci a unit of measure. All right, we're awaiting the Manafort memo, and, look, you heard these guys. They're experts. They look at these kinds of things all the time. But if you want to talk about Mueller, the man winds up being an instruction in his methods, right? That's what we're learning here, is that this is happening the way he does things. So our next guest literally wrote the book on Mueller. What's his guidance on what this report would look like, what Mueller would want to achieve, and how likely is he to go? How likely is he to go as far as this process does? Next. All right, we're on Mueller watch. We're waiting for a crucial memo from the special counsel, the Manafort sentencing memo. Yes, we've seen them before, but this is the one that is supposed to show the connecting of the dots between what Manafort did and why it matters specifically to the Russia investigation, whether it's criminal or counter investigation. Now, who better to ask than the man who wrote the book on Robert Mueller, Garrett Graff. There's his book. There's the man. Garrett, good to have you. So the suggestion that, well, this is the one, this is where they have to lay it out. What is the suggestion about what the special counsel would need to show about Manafort in this pleading we're waiting for?
Well, this is an opportunity, the sentencing memo, to present a theory of the case. What we have seen so far in so many of these Manafort documents is simply the what. That we've seen the actions that he's taken, the financial transactions, the records, the evidence, but we haven't actually seen why. Why was he giving that polling data to Konstantin Kilimnik? Why was he traveling to Madrid to meet with Konstantin Kilimnik? Sort of what were the conversations? What was the role that Paul Manafort was playing in that June 2016 Trump Tower meeting? Does that connect to all of the rest of this? Why was Paul Manafort working for free in the midst of the Trump campaign as he was tens of millions of dollars in hock to Russian oligarchs? Sort of what was going through Paul Manafort's mind? And that's what we might end up seeing in this sentencing memo, at least as best as the Mueller team understands.
And of course, we know that there are redactions. In fact, if we don't see it on our watch tonight, it's probably because the court has to negotiate those redactions. It can take time. So then we get to the report, whether it's next week or the week after or after that. My question to you is, you've been following this very closely. Do you believe we are done until the report? This memo comes out on Manafort. This is a big enchilada for him. He spent the most time on this case. Next comes the report, nothing in between.
It's hard to say. John and Neil were talking about this, I think, very thoughtfully a few minutes ago. That this is
yeah, but they're not
when
journalists.
we say the
I
Mueller report,
always turn to a journalist when I really need something.
Everyone in America sort of hears the Mueller report and thinks of that telephone book sized, absolutely definitive, be all and end all report. And that's not necessarily what we're going to see, I think, from Mueller, in part because Mueller doesn't necessarily control what ends up getting turned over from the Attorney General's office to Congress. And so what we have seen Mueller do throughout is that every indictment that he has brought, every court filing, is more detailed, more insightful, better informed, and more narrative than we actually need for the underlying criminal charges. It's why we refer to these as speaking indictments, that they sort of have a role beyond simply proving the criminal case. And one of the things that I sort of would imagine Mueller is thinking at this moment, and his team is thinking, is further indictments, if they can bring them, further court filings, if they can make them. That's the only way that Mueller controls what is made public and when. And so I think that there's a lot of breadcrumbs that Bob Mueller has left us in these court documents over the last year and a half, really. And I think that he wouldn't have left them for us. He wouldn't have left this level of detail unless he had another move or two up his sleeve.
That's the final point. Is a good point. Garrett Graff, thank you very much. Appreciate the insight. I'll bring you back as soon as we know more. All right, so another big story. Congressman Steve King's racist remarks have made him a political pariah, but not with the president. I told you when it happened, we can't let it go. Either you stand against prejudice or you don't. Did you hear what the president said about King today? And the sad words he had about the guy who wanted to kill a bunch of us. You're going to hear them. They say a lot. Next.